Welcome to the Barbara Show. This is our English episode, and every once in a while we will give you an English episode. Thank you for following us on Isibo TV every Sunday from 7 to 7:30 on YouTube. I appreciate your views, your likes, your comments, your ideas. I really appreciate what you do for us. Like you know, this is a platform that invites different individuals to share testimonies, experiences, to educate us, inspire us, motivate us, to help us become better people. And I don't always go away from that. When I'm thinking of guests, I'm thinking of people who will teach us something. And today is not any different. In light of the 20th anniversary, upcoming anniversary of Imbuto Foundation, I found myself thinking about what this organization has done to empower girls, but not only girls, even the youth in this country, the programs they have been involved in, the programs they have championed. I couldn't help myself but think, I need someone from Imbuto Foundation to talk to about this journey of transformation, this journey of inspiration. And without saying so much more than that, I have invited the Director General of Imbuto Foundation, Ms. Sandrine Umutoni, to come and talk to us about what this anniversary looks like for them, but even what this whole journey of 20 years has been for Imbuto Foundation. Thank you so much, Sandrine, for coming to the show.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for having me.
Yes. So 20 years. Wow. Time goes so fast.
It flies. It really flies by.
Truly.
It flies by.
So in these 20 years that you're about to celebrate the anniversary, what days, what events, what do you have coming up that highlight this journey that Imbuto Foundation has taken in the transformational journey in Rwanda?
Thank you so much, Barbara. So this year actually has been quite eventful for us. We actually began the year acknowledging that at some point during the year, once COVID will allow us to, we would have a celebration with the people who have been part of this really impressive journey. 20 years of empowering the family, looking at the holistic models that follow the life cycle of the beneficiaries or the communities of Rwanda. So with every single quarter of the year, we try to acknowledge something specific happening in Rwanda through the 20 years of Imbuto Foundation. As the foundation is focusing on programs in health, in education, and youth empowerment, we wanted to make sure that every quarter of the year we'll be acknowledging something special. So as recently we acknowledged the International Day of the Girl Child, we went back into the beginning of Imbuto Foundation. Since the foundation became, as we started with the health of mothers, making sure that mothers who had been infected by HIV/AIDS will be given an opportunity to, one, have access to the right treatment, have the right psychosocial support because it's a heavy disease to deal with, but also looking at how the children will be born free of HIV/AIDS. So we are now looking at, with the International Day of the Girl Child, we're going back to the origins, the mother giving birth to the new generations of Rwanda, and looking at the children. If it happens to be a young girl, is this young girl taken care of from the time that the mother is pregnant with her? Are we looking at her early child development needs, for instance? And as she grows up, we acknowledge that, yes, we do have equal access to education in Rwanda. Public education, is free. So again, everybody can have access to it, but we acknowledge that there are some challenges very specific to the girl child that boys do not have to deal with. So such challenges, for instance, include pushing the girl, to go really beyond what is expected of her. So with the International Day of the Girl Child, we look at what challenges are still present in the community that could hinder the potential the potential of this young woman that we want to grow into the next leader of Rwanda, the next mother of Rwanda. So with the International Day of the Girl Child, we also looked at this campaign that has been going on around Rwanda for many years now, looking at the prevention of gender-based violence, for instance. So we acknowledge that with the COVID crisis, people were staying home, people were not going to school. So we noticed in some communities there was an increase in, let's say, teenage pregnancies. So we had to acknowledge that through the work of the foundation that we do with some partners. We also look at these teenage mothers, how are they doing? They are kids having kids themselves. So can we talk about their mental health, for instance? If there are cases of gender-based violence, can we play our part in connecting these young girls to the local authorities or the security organs in charge of protecting them and making sure that the attackers who are still present in the community do not get another chance to hurt another person in that community. So the International Day of the Girl Child was a heavy moment of reflection about, yes, we have come so far when it comes to gender empowerment, gender equality, but there are still some pockets within communities that really hinder the development of our young women. And as His Excellency, the President, mentioned, you can't aspire for a truly developed nation if you're leaving half of the population behind and don't acknowledge what is hurting them.
You've mentioned something around gender-based violence. What are the strides that Imbuto Foundation has made in combating gender-based violence, and how does the average Rwandan join that fight?
So the work we have been doing around gender-based violence takes different forms. One of them is actually through the programs we have for girls' education. Whenever we're able to organize forums with these young girls, the young women, we try to bring in as much as possible older women or accomplished women who can serve as role models. And then part of the conversation also centers around what are the challenges that are very specific to young women in this country, or I would say in general, young women even around the world. And we acknowledge that women can be more vulnerable to some kind of violence. So it is very important that the young girl who may be still, I want to say innocent, doesn't think that people look at her a certain way, that she can hear from her older sisters say, you know, there will come a time when somebody may, see you a different way, may think they have access to your body, and you need to understand that you own your body, that you need to give consent. If you do not give consent, then it's an act of violence, it's rape. There are no other words for it. So first, to be able to acknowledge that violence can happen, and violence can be done physically to you, because we talk about mental violence as well, economic violence, but specifically this time around about gender-based violence applied to the physical body of a woman. And then we also talk about the laws of Rwanda. Rwanda takes a very strong stance when it comes to gender-based violence. There are laws in place. There are institutions also that have been created, like the Isange One-Stop Center that was actually initiated a number of years ago through the support of the First Lady of Rwanda. So with the Isange One-Stop Center, for instance, where it is an area where all the services that need to be provided, from the medical support to the legal support to the victim of gender-based violence, actually can be addressed in one place. So again, through the work we do, through the different programs with young women, we also try to make them understand that there's a place in the community, and generally it's within the district hospital where they live, that they can go and report a case of sexual violence, for instance. And then we also try to educate her surrounding community, because there's still a culture of silence around gender-based violence for many reasons. But the first step really that we need to understand is, if we strive to have a safe and secure country for everybody, it would not make any sense that those who are targeted because of their gender do not feel safe, or once something happened to them, that the community decides to keep it silent, because then all of a sudden, not only you've been the victim of the crime, but now you have to carry the burden of the crime and the shame that goes with it. So obviously it's work that takes a while. It's something that you have to keep engaging with, again, the local authorities, the community, religious leaders also have to be part of this conversation, because we really understand that to break this culture of silence, you can't leave anybody out of the conversation. And most importantly, we try to bring in the men as much as possible in these conversations around sexual reproductive health, addressing gender-based violence. And more recently, we've been conducting what we call GBV clinics. And that's done again in partnership with the government of Rwanda and the One UN Rwanda, and of course the security organ, the police, RIB. And we go to different areas around the country and talk again to these young women who have been victims of violence, to again be able to identify, because that's where it starts. You have to be able to identify that you've been a victim of a crime. Because again, young people, I want to say, sometimes they say, no, but he's my boyfriend. Yes, I love him. Yes. I didn't feel like I was attacked. It wasn't like a stranger who jumped me in the middle of the night. So like gender-based violence takes many forms. Sometimes most of the time actually, it's someone who's close to you, somebody that you look up to.
Someone you trust.
That's correct. So how do you recognize that an act of violence has happened? How do you report it? And then the psychosocial support that needs to continue to say it was not your fault, to understand that. And then in the cases of our teen mothers that we work with around the country, we also bringing the mom and the dad or the guardians of this child, this young woman now because she's become a mother, to also stop the blame game. Because we sometimes notice that the father will blame the mother.
Yes, for the...
So it's like, why didn't you talk to your daughter? And the mother is like, I did not know she was pregnant, you know, because sometimes people find out quite late. But yeah, there's definitely a great effort of education, but as everything else happening in this country, the communities are receptive. When you take the time to sit down and talk to them and hear their point of view and exchange, I don't know a parent who actually wishes that something bad would happen to their child. So once you're able to deconstruct some of those myths and deconstruct even like this question of masculinity, consent, what it really means, you actually find that people become the greatest advocates against gender-based violence and are more open about this is happening here. I know it, I've seen it, I'm willing to report it. So it's continuous work that we need to do.
Yeah. I keep hearing that Imbuto Foundation works with communities. There is a lot of personal contact, visiting different communities, having these deep conversations. And then COVID happens. COVID happens. You have had all these programs happening in the communities. You have mentoring programs for the youth. Then COVID happens. Then for us to stay safe, we have to stay in our houses. How have you handled that?
All right. So the first one, so go back to last March when the first case of COVID was declared in Rwanda and everybody went back home, basically. Like that was the only safe place to stay. It was a shock. I think we were all part of the collective, you know, the community that really took a hit. Yes, again, we have to be careful because we acknowledge that the work of the foundation continued, so we were not subject to the same economic crisis as other people were because of COVID. And for that, we are very grateful that we were able to continue working with our different partners. But the fact of staying home was a big challenge for all of us. Yes. The work of the community of Imbuto Foundation meant that for us, literally every week, if not every other week, we were up country. In Rusizi, Nyagatare, Burera, you name it, we were going there. So to be told all of a sudden, stay home, stay put.
And those people who are also depending on you are now going to have to not see you. How? Yeah.
So like they say, every crisis brings an amazing opportunity for you to respond to a challenge. When we were asked to stay home, we learned to rely even more on community-based organization. And it was quite interesting that the COVID actually happened at a time that we were right in the middle of a strategic plan where we were saying we need to empower more community-based organization to do the implementation of the work that we do. So, of course, we would have loved to have a bit more time to adjust to that strategy and everything. So when it happened, we're like, okay, we've been talking about this strategic plan. Now is the time to see if we were really onto something. So where before, let's say, would be somebody on my team going to Urera and check on how the community-based organization is doing, now everything is on the phone. Because you can't always, you know, assume that somebody has the best network connection at home for you to be able to Zoom and, you know, all of these things.
We even have the skills to do that.
Right? We all had to learn that. We all had to learn how to conduct like online meetings. We're still learning about it, to be honest. So we now looked to the community-based organization, looked at the organs like the local authorities and said, okay, we are now relying on you to tell us what's happening. We're not there physically. So tell us, now let's see how the monitoring and evaluation, you know, trainings we've been doing for all these months, let's see how strong it was, how well it was going. And he actually delivered results because, again, if I'm not able to go literally to, let's say, Nyagatare, meet with the mayor, but I have a community-based organization who's a bit more mobile, obviously respecting the safety measures. That young person who's in a community-based organization knows about, let's say, the teenage mother who's struggling financially right now. So they can report to us, let us know how she's doing. We can reach out to the local authority, do the advocacy that we are supposed to be doing, and help. So through the crisis, you also saw the power of networking, the power of all these networks that come together to deliver, because you could not go, like, no matter what you wanted. And you also had to be responsible enough to say, I'm not going to ask for special permission to travel up country when everybody's staying home. It would not be fair as well. So you learned, like they say, let go and let God.
Yes,
yes.
yes.
And you really say, we've been talking about this strategy, empowering the community-based organization, relying more on our partners on the ground. Let's rely on this network now, and let's see if this is actually, going to deliver on the results that we were hoping for.
How did that work?
So it was tricky at the beginning, as you can imagine.
Which is expected.
So there were definitely many hours on the phone with people trying to understand who's struggling with what, how can we help. But I think this is where, I was in Rwanda during COVID, so I don't know how the other countries around the world handled beyond what was presented on the news. But you notice that our history gave us an advantage. The ability to react quickly, when something happened. The fact that we do have a government that is supported by a very strong army, and I'm talking about the army because they were the ones also, like, when it was time to do the vaccination, they were deploying, they like, literally they were using their own resources to make sure that vaccines were getting there at the right time. When we had the first phase of vaccinations, literally all these districts around the country were receiving vaccine at the same time, beginning. So there is something quite special about the organization of this country, like how from top down, like, channels of communications work. And when there's a crisis, everybody focuses on the crisis and say, we have to fix this. It's going to be uncomfortable, obviously, because we all used to going out when we want to go out. We like to see each other for meetings, and we have to learn to stay home, look at that screen for hours and hours.
Stay focused.
Yeah, can you hear me? Your mic is
then
muted.
It breaks off, you have to come back. What were we talking about? Yeah.
Exactly, like you're going on for like 5 minutes explaining something, and then the person is like, I'm sorry, were you talking? And you're like, yes, I was.
Yes.
So it was definitely a challenge, but again, we are seeing the results today of being able to rely more on the partners, on the ground. And I think this also goes with trust. If you have established a good relationship with partners at the community level, you can call them literally at any time and be like, let me know what is happening. And you can have this open conversation. And again, we're still learning from COVID, like one day everything is fine, next day you hear that there's a new variant that's out. Thankfully now we have more and more people who are vaccinated, so we can do this, even in person. But I think if anything, COVID should be a lesson we do not forget. We managed to find out that we could rely on technology to do our work. You can rely on, again, the partner who's on the ground to feed you information. Of course, you have to find a way to verify, because every information has to be verified, because sometimes it's about the life of somebody, or most of the time. But I think the COVID crisis should be teaching us, because people talk about like other health issues to come in the future, as climate change is really becoming an issue even for us as a country on the continent. So what are the lessons learned from this time? And for instance, just I guess going a bit off topic, but like one lesson from the COVID crisis is you need to prioritize your mental health. You definitely need to invest in it. And with people working from home, internally, we were also acknowledging that we all have like different family situations, different age groups. Some people were brand new to the foundation, so unfortunately for them, they didn't even get a chance to meet everybody before everybody went on lockdown. But how do you cater to your mental health, like of your staff, for instance? How do you acknowledge that people who work from home and have children, at home at the same time, you can ask them to be available at any time. You have to become flexible. You can say, okay, morning meetings do not work because you're helping with the homework, exactly. So let's be flexible, you know. But also paying attention to the beneficiaries' mental health. Because, I mean, like I said, we were fortunate enough to be able to keep our jobs. We didn't have to deal with, because we know some people were laid off, some people had to see like their salaries decreased. Fortunately, we were able to keep working the way we were working, but we acknowledged that the life of our beneficiaries were not always the same. So there again, we looked up to the government when they were putting in place like different campaigns to help the most vulnerable ones, the ones who were most affected by the crisis. Actually, at the beginning of COVID, I don't know if you remember, the first few months, actually, the government mobilized all the senior officials to donate
their
1 month,
salaries
exactly. So again, that's what I'm saying, that the history of this country has definitely shaped the mindset of our people, where we say, you know what, when it's time to
step in, we step in.
100%, exactly.
So Imbuto Foundation empowers youth through Atranda Ubuhanzi, and you empower young entrepreneurs, innovators. Do you have future plans for such programs moving forward now?
Yes, so those two programs you just mentioned are part of our youth empowerment unit, where we say, okay, young people make the largest demographic group of Rwanda. We believe that they will be the ones who take over after us, after we're no longer doing what we are doing. So what is our responsibility now, again, as an organization that has access to different resources, access to different networks, or what have you? So the first one you mentioned, Atranda Ubuhanzi, which is a very, very special program to us, because we got to travel all around the country again, but this time not about health, not about, you know, it was about one of the most beautiful things in life, which is art and discovering talent. And literally you will go into some of the most remote areas of this country where there are no art schools, no music school, whatever, and you find just raw talent, you know. So there is this great journey that we embarked on with, again, partners from My Culture, partners at the Guanyu Rwanda, but also KOICA, the Korean cooperation, where we were able to identify all these young talents, bring them into those who were selected, you know, because it was a selection process, take them through an incubation. And through this incubation, we were strengthening the entrepreneurship skills. Because for this project, it was not just about talent detection, but it was also about, is it possible for us to create jobs through the creative industries and you know, cultural industries? And the answer was yes, a resounding yes. But what was missing, and we're still working on that to some extent, is how do we empower these young people to run their own business when their business is their art, when their business is their talent? So last year when we were going through the tough time of COVID, we also noticed that the cultural industries were among the ones that were the most like hardly hit by the crisis, because people were not talking about, you know, like having concerts on Zoom, like now you hear about it. At the time, like people were staying home, and again, they were like that one particular industry that was hit in a very specific way. So we came up with another idea again through the Atranda Ubuhanzi, was to, you know, open up a fund to about 29 artists and enterprises looking at, you know, cultural entrepreneurship, for instance. And through this program, we were able to, again, like give them a certain grant and say, you've been hit in a certain way. If you were given this much money, and it was about, if I remember correctly, like 10 million Rwandan francs per initiative or per artist. If you were given 10 million Rwandan francs, what would you be able to do? You know, but again, because our resources are limited in the sense that there's so many priorities, again, that were heightened by COVID. If we're giving you this amount, how do you make sure that this amount will generate even more, you know, income moving forward? So again, for us, it's all about entrepreneurship, but looking at the uniqueness of our young people and our artists. And same for our Accelerator, which is another program that we're doing in partnership again with the Guanyu in Rwanda, where we ask young people in the communities to address a challenge that's really relevant to them. So for these young people, we talk about sexual reproductive health, for instance, and then we added the challenge of mental health. And we say, okay, you are young, you're full of ideas, tell us, one, what you consider to be an issue, what would you like to address, and then give it to us, but under a business form. Because again, we're talking about creation of employment for young people. So these solutions had to be viable from a business perspective. But again, there is this mentoring that goes along with it, because young people have amazing ideas, but the world of entrepreneurship is harsh. It is harsh. So you need to be, mentored with people who have made it before you, who can tell you about all the mistakes they've made along the way, so you know what to avoid. But the mentorship is really about teaching you about how do you, things that may seem simple for someone who's been in the business world or entrepreneurship world for a while, but something like how do you make a business plan? What are your marketing strategies? How do you make sure that your product is really there to respond to a need on the community? And if you happen to notice that that need has been responded, do you close shop? No. How do you reinvent yourself? So this mentorship guidance, if I can call it so, is done through very specific classes that we actually do in partnership with BPN, because we believe that beyond the creativity that you have, you need to be able to also understand that when it comes to the economy, it goes beyond creativity. You need to understand the rules of, the labor market. You need to understand how taxes work. You need to understand how you apply for grants. And behind all that really is the strong message that was there at the beginning of Imbuto, which is you can do for yourself. You do not need to rely on somebody else. Yes, you may need some helpful knowledge, like everybody else has, but at the end of the day, if once we give you the tools, go and make, something for yourself. And in that process, make sure that you also empower the next person. So it becomes like a chain, Whatever you give me, Sandrine, I will give to Barbara. Barbara will give to the next person, etc., etc.
Wow. Before we go for our break, one more question. Do you have other projects that you are at liberty to share with our audience that you're working on?
Definitely. So still in line with the youth employment, creation of jobs for our young people. And I forgot to mention that at the beginning actually is for the foundation, all our initiatives are always aligned with government priorities. Yes. So we look at, let's say, the National Strategy for Transformation, and then at a large extent, what are the objectives of the African Union, what are the objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals. So as we acknowledge that we need to create jobs for our young people so they can be competitive and really drive the economic development of our country and by extension our continent, we do want to continue with Art Rwanda Ubuhanzi. So we are now about to graduate the first cohort of our young artists. We are now going to go back to the community again, if COVID allows us, and detect new talent. Wow. But we also want to focus on the cultural management, because it is something that has really come out as one niche in this industry that needs to be strengthened even further. So where before we were focusing on the artists, the ones who produce and put out on the market, now we also want to acknowledge the cultural managers. Where are they in this chain? Can we now talk about the agent, for instance, of the artist, the one who's really responsible for going to identify opportunities for the artist and make sure that the artist is protected? Because again, intellectual property is also something that is still under a lot of discussion. Same for the iAccelerator. In a couple of weeks, we'll be launching a new challenge. And as we've been discussing about the importance of mental health, we do want to focus on mental health moving forward. Up to now at the foundation, it has been mostly mental health was addressed through different projects. Now we really want to give the priority and say, can we have a program just for mental health itself? So it's not through sexual reproductive health, it's not through youth empowerment, it's really its own program for the sake of mental health only.
Wonderful.
So this is something that we're definitely pushing forward. And at the end of the month, as we'll be having the big celebration for our 20th anniversary, again, we want to bring back, everybody who has been a part of the foundation from the early days, when we were looking at the protection of women who were infected with HIV/AIDS, so they would not pass on the disease to their children, to now today when we're talking about empowerment of community-based organizations, we're also talking about the financial sustainability of the foundation. When you work as an NGO, you're a nonprofit, so you're not generating income per se. But we're also acknowledging with the COVID crisis, more specifically, that you need to have some kind of financial independence. So you are not so much vulnerable to the changes in the development world, where today is about climate change, tomorrow is about terrorism, management, I don't know if you call it like that. But at Imbuto we say, can we have our own trust fund, for instance? Because now the legislation has actually allowed it in Rwanda, that companies, organizations can create their own trust fund, so you can generate income which will be reinvested back into the initiatives of Imbuto Foundation for the Rwandan communities. And through that trust fund, for instance, what we're hoping to also do is to be able to support more community-based organizations, to be able to expand the networks of Rwanda. And last but not least, a couple of weeks ago, as there was the Youth Connect summit
in Ghana.
Exactly. This was quite an inspiring moment to be able to get in touch with different, young people from all kind of corners of the continent. And now we are looking at, okay, Imbuto has been around for 20 years. What else are we learning from the continent? What else are we able to give to the continent? And as you may know, the Youth Connect summit or initiative in general was actually started through the initiative of His Excellency, the President of the Republic. So this new door that opened for us onto the continent, for us is like the next step in the life of the foundation, where we say we need to reinforce South-South cooperation. We need to be able to learn from best practices from other people on the continent, and we need to also share the story of Rwanda with people who are on the, on the other side of the borders. And through that initiative of continental exchanges at the Youth Connect summit that happened in Ghana, we saw that, some of the issues we talk about here are the same ones that people are talking about. It's in Nigeria, in Angola, for instance. So we're saying, let's open up, Cooperation should not just be north-south. It needs to be south-south as well. Yeah. So that's some of the big projects that we are focusing on right now.
Thank you so much for sharing. Let's take a break. We'll come back. And yes, as I said, we are soon celebrating the 20th anniversary of Imbuto Foundation. And we're learning so much from the journey they have taken. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Barbara Show, our weekly Sunday show that comes to inspire you, to motivate you, and educate you. And I also learn along the way as I ask these questions. So thank you. We are with Sandrine Omutoni from Imbuto Foundation. And Imbuto Foundation is about to celebrate their 20th anniversary. So if you've missed what she has shared in the minutes past, you can always go back to the YouTube channel of this show and follow up the whole conversation, and then enjoy like I am enjoying. Thank you so much, Sandrine.
Thank you.
So you find yourself leading at Imbuto Foundation as the Director General. What has this leadership journey been like for you?
So the leadership journey has been one of learning, like you just mentioned. I've been learning so much from working with the First Lady of Rwanda, learning from the beginning of Imbuto Foundation. 20 years ago, when the work of the foundation began through Imbuto Foundation, we were actually looking at a single project. It was called the Protection and Care of Families Against HIV/AIDS, as we were looking at women who had been infected by HIV/AIDS, including those who had been raped and purposely
Sorry to cut you short. Was it always called Imbuto Foundation?
No, PACFA. PACFA was the name.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
To go back to your question of what does it mean to lead, it's such a humbling experience, because nothing in your life can really prepare you for this type of journey where you are literally put in a position where someone says, okay, it does not matter how young you are, if you're a woman, if you've led I don't know how many companies before, I believe you can do this. Wow. Go and do it. Wow. And I think by extension is something that also applies to other sectors of this country, because we are talking about being given a chair at the table, you know, really a seat at the table, and say, again, don't let all those labels limit you. We do not care that you're a woman. We do not care that you're young. We don't care what your parents did. You as a person, what are you going to give to your country right now? So someone gives you like a blank canvas and say, go to work.
Paint on it.
Exactly. And obviously it's a lot of pressure, because again, with this much responsibility comes also a stronger sense of, let me not waste it, let me not take it for granted. But we really evolve in an environment at the foundation where you're supported by so many people, from the staff to the General Assembly to the board members made of strictly women, like a General Assembly, strictly women. So these are women who have such inspiring journeys, you know, for themselves, that you can only learn from them. Wow. So it's definitely something that is humbling, that is challenging. And I would wish for more young people in this country to realize how incredibly fortunate we are to be evolving in a country that is able to see you for you, and not use who you are and your age as an excuse to not give you access to more responsibility. It's definitely not something that is actually a given for the rest of the world, at least from my experience, from what I've seen in different countries. And it's often something that strikes me personally when I'm traveling on mission, you know, going to meet with your counterparts, and it's always the same reaction from your counterpart when they're saying, it's you? You know? Yeah, so they always expect to see, and no offense to the men, but they always expect to see an older man in the position. You know what I mean? And it's good, because it really shows you that there's some things really at work in Rwanda where it's about your brain first. If you're able to think, if you're able to deliver, if you're going to be held accountable for what you do, we are going to give you this position. Again, do not waste it, because someone else will also come after you and learn from what you've been able to achieve. So I would say amazing journey. And to be able to be here to witness the 20th anniversary, when I remember where I was 20 years ago, again, nothing could have prepared me for this moment. But it's amazing. It's an amazing journey.
I love how you say that this country is evolving into a country that sees you for who you are, irrespective of the gender, the age. If you can deliver, you will be given the seat at the table. So what have you really enjoyed most about working there?
So to me, the most impressive thing is Imbuto works in the community. So for me, as someone who did not grow up in Rwanda, to be able to come back as an adult, to enter the workforce and be given this access to the entire country. Literally, we've gone all 30 districts, all these hills, up and down. Wow. Whether the sun was shining, whether it was raining, doesn't matter. We were working in the community. So to me, it's something that this kind of open door into a word that I wouldn't say the average Rwandan does not get to see. And I can see how sometimes living in Kigali, you can sort of get lost in this is the reality, and it's not. This is not
the reality.
No, there's more to Rwanda than Kigali, than what you see. So when you're able to travel all around to learn from the different, people that you interact with, and again to be part of this generation of people who saw, the genocide against the Tutsi take place, see the resilience of the people who survived the genocide, the efforts for the community to come back together, and now to be able to work in an organization that's really testing all these, policies every single day and delivering on them is something that is, again, quite impressive. And it gives you a great sense of fulfillment because you see your work and you see the result. You meet, I mean, until today, I still meet people who were beneficiaries of Imbuto Foundation like 10, 15 years ago who come and tell you, you know, I've actually attended this youth forum series for young people, and it's through this, and they will even tell you the name of the speaker on that day, and they say, that actually led me to take on, you know, this responsibility. Or when you look at some of the young people who were actually given scholarship to finish their education, and today they have some like high-level positions either in the private sector or the government. Again, you see the work of Imbuto Foundation, you see the work of an organization that was able to connect the dots about the different, you know, the vision of the country, what partners can bring to the table, but most importantly, what you can achieve when a community gets on board and you're able to have this exchange with them and say, what do you think about this? Is this important to you? If it's not, why is it not? Can we, like, I'm not here to impose an initiative on you. It's more like, if I believe that this can make a difference and you see it some other way, how does your idea help improve my initiative? So it's a great journey. It's a great journey of growth and acquiring knowledge, and again, seeing that community works, you know, they really work, and community empowerment is not just a word people throw out in conferences. It really exists, yes.
Yeah. Well, as we close this show, what would you tell young Rwandans following us in the country and following us in the diaspora?
So young people, whether you're in Rwanda or in the diaspora, so maybe let's start with the diaspora ones. You belong to this country. Just because you're not here physically does not mean that your heart cannot be here, that you cannot follow what is happening, that you cannot voice what you have to say. Like I said, for many of us who grew up outside of the country, being able to say, nah, I have a country is something that is priceless. So even if you are living overseas, there's still something you can contribute to, you know, learn about your country, learn about your history. If there is an initiative that speaks to you, again, like technology has brought us so much closer. You don't need to be in Kigali for me and you to work together. So there's definitely something you can give back to your country. To the youth in Rwanda, I want to say, what do I want to say? It's, this country is for you. It really is for you. It does not belong to, I don't know, like this generation, that generation. It is your country at the same, you know, level as everybody else who's been here before. And again, it does not matter, you know, what region you come from, the history of your parents. This is your time. Use it to the best of your abilities. Be curious. Be extremely curious. Do not take everything you see or read for granted. Try to research a little bit more. Try to find out what is happening in the community around you. Try to find out what your colleague, you know, is working on. And most importantly, by being curious and focusing on what else is happening around you, bring everything together and see what your contribution is. I believe that everybody is unique for a reason. Your contribution will have to be different from mine, so don't ever underestimate what you bring to the table. Do not think that because you didn't start at the same level as somebody else, that's it, that's your finish line. No, there's no such thing. You determine your finish line, so go and cross it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandrine.
Thank
well,
you, yeah.
You had it. Yeah. You are the one who determines your finish line, and the country is ours. Thank you for following the Barbara Show, and like I say every time, God bless you. Wakoze gukurikira ikiganiro The Barbara Show. Nimba ukibonye kuri YouTube The Barbara Show, kora subscribe iri gukomeza kubona amakuru n'ibindi biganiro byinshi bikomeza kuza. Nimba udukurikira kuri Facebook, nimba udukurikira kuri Instagram, turakwishimiye cyane, no kuri Twitter muzajya mukomeza kubona amakuru, ndetse ntimukasibe kureba iki kiganiro ku Isibo TV. Turabashimiye rero ku mwanya wanyu mwaduhaye. Imana